guys. I'm very excited to be here. I am Kathy Griffin, comedy fugitive, and I have a hell of a story to tell, and I'm really, really honored to be here. I didn't even go to college, I'm not gonna lie. I'm not gonna try to like bullshit and say I majored in getting in trouble, really is what I did. So first of all, I just wanna tell you some stuff because you may have heard about my infamous photo, but there are a lot of parts that I want you to know for your own well-being, or if you know any dumb Americans who don't understand the First Amendment, which is on my shirt, which can be purchased at kathygriffin.com. I'll wait. All right, so anyway, on May 30th, 2017, my whole life changed. So part of my story is your life really can change in a day. I also learned that there is such a thing as bad publicity. I learned that the hard way. All right, so I have known, I call him Orange Dumbass. I've known Donald Trump like since the 90s. And I do want to say in America's defense, we really didn't think he was going to be, I call him the accidental president, but he colluded with the Russians and it was a whole campaign and there's gerrymandering, it's a long story. But anyway, he cheated and now we're stuck with him. So stay here. The first thing I just want to say is just fucking stay here. Sorry for cursing so soon. So what we are now living under is what could be morphing truly into an authoritarian government. So I've only known a world, I mean, I'm 58 years old. So the idea that the right wing and the actual president tweeted at me personally for a photo that I took, which was a mask I got on Amazon Prime. It was a Halloween mask and it had ketchup on it. So first of all, I thought I was being edgy and making a statement. So it turns out that I was put into what I call the Trump wood chipper. And they had done this like with his opponents. You know, remember the nicknames like Little Marco? Well, that one's kind of deserved. And, you know, Lion Ted. But I was actually the first, you know, quote, celebrity that this happened to. And this photo happened before Me Too and before Weinstein. And the reason I bring that up is a lot of people say, after all the crap Trump has done, that if that photo had come out now, it probably would not have engendered that reaction. But I've learned so much in the last, it's like a year and 7 months. And what I learned was that, this is so insane, but it's all true. First of all, you're looking at history. That's right. Actually, in the history of the United States of America, and this is true, no sitting US president has ever used the Oval Office, the first family, quotes, first family. You guys, what about Melanie, the first lady? I call her Melanie after she wore that freaking jacket. I really don't care, do you? Yes, Melanie. Also, one time Trump twatted on the Twitter machine that I miss Melanie, I hope she comes back from the hospital. Like, he doesn't even know her name. So he's illiterate and he's like aggressively stupid. Like, he's Britney Spears stupid. I'm not gonna lie. And then they have their sons, Eddie Munster and Date Rape. And I say that with love, because I just can't believe that there's consensual sex with Eric Trump at all. And for a family that throws names around, I'm getting in the game. But anyway, so it's so crazy because what happened was, you know, I talk a lot about ageism and misogyny, and I just love what I do. And I try to like set these markers for younger people, women, people of color, gay people, whomever. But I know it sounds corny, but like I'm actually in the Guinness Book of World Records for having written and produced and starred in more televised stand-up comedy specials than any comedian, living or dead, male or female. So I do stuff like that so that when I kick the bucket, you got, yeah, that's right. Yeah. Oh, and also I have 2 Emmys, and Trump doesn't have any. And I swear that's got half the battle. Yes. So it didn't used to be lethal to win an Emmy, but now it's very dangerous with this guy. But the way that I know this fool is because I would run into him at NBC Universal events all the time. And he was actually, I'm glad you referenced Suddenly Susan, because that's how I met him. And he shows up on the set of Suddenly Susan, the show I was on in the 90s with Brooke Shields, and he shows up with Marla. That's how long ago. Yes, her name was Marla. She was a showgirl, and she wasn't allowed to talk. But anyway, so he doesn't like when ladies talk. So he was just, you know, such a buffoon, but I'll never forget my introduction, which is I went up to him, and as was customary if you're on a sitcom, I said, hi, my name is Kathy Griffin. I play the role of Vicky, and we have a scene together. Nice to meet you. And he goes, call me the Donald. And just think about that. As he is traveling the world as a so-called world leader, like, you know, he went to Pyongyang and went went up to Kim Jong-un and said, like, should I call you the Un? So it's very embarrassing, and we are trying to get rid of him, and I would explain the system with the Russian interference and the online media campaign, which then turned on me. Like, you know, like those companies that went under, like Cambridge Analytica and stuff, they actually participated in memes you may have seen that said, I'm laughing now, I couldn't then. They tried to perpetuate the actual notion that I had joined ISIS. Obviously. And because ISIS is, they're actually recruiting a lot of 58-year-old red-haired female comedians. So now when people stop me on the street, like actually last night I had a driver from the airport to the hotel, and I'm not kidding, he recognized me, and he said, he was Moroccan, and he said, if you were in Morocco, I would cut your tongue off. And I said, well, I would cut your dick off first. And I got it on film, so I'm gonna post it. So the point is, like, one of the reasons I'm excited to be here is, like, a lot of people think that this sort of messed up thing happened to me and it caused me a hassle for a week or something. But the truth is, I don't have one single day of paid work ahead of me for the rest of my life. Now, my inner Joan Rivers, my idol, I just can't believe that. So I am just biting and scratching my way back any way I can. And I've been through so much, but I truly am the first person in the history of the United States to have a sitting president use the first family, the full power of the Oval Office. The Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, old-time Klan member, long-time big Klan fan. And somehow, I thought he was dead, by the way. Like, when he became the AG, I'm like, I thought the guy died. Nope, he's alive. Anyway, and a lot of people may not know this, but the Department of Justice put me under 2 federal investigations, the Secret Service and the US Attorney's Office. So that's never happened. And I did a lot of research, because a lot of people know that Lenny Bruce was arrested. That was local PD. My good friend and idol, Jane Fonda, was arrested and tortured by like the Nixon era, and that was local PD as well. So I really am the first American in history to have the Department of Justice try to, in the words of Don Jr. on Good Morning America, decimate Kathy Griffin. So they were very plain about it. They said, we don't just want to ruin her career, we want to decimate her. So when that photo went live on TMZ, which is a fun guilty pleasure blog, but it's owned by this guy named Harvey Levin, who's a gay Republican, which means a gay super conservative. And you know, Trump he's not down with the gays. He doesn't care about gay rights or really human rights. And so that's odd. So when it went right to TMZ, they were recording my tour cancellations in real time. So now that people were thinking that I was in ISIS, then CNN makes me breaking news. And by the way, I just want to clear this up. I never worked for CNN, okay? I did one night a year there. The first 2 years I did New Year's Eve with Anderson Cooper. It didn't even occur to me to ask to get paid. Yes, so one thing I want to say, especially to the women, is talk about money. We need to start talking about it, because the more you talk about it, you're aware of it, then you can try to get equal pay. I mean, we're not there yet, even though Oprah said, a new day is on the horizon. Not yet, Oprah. Talk to Gail first, not yet, but we're trying to get there. And so then CNN put me on the ticker. Kathy Griffin joins ISIS and is fired from New Year's Eve. So then Don Jr. posts, that's not good enough for our family. We want her banned for life. So I'm banned for life from CNN. What if I die? Obituary? Where? It's not gonna be on Fox. Oh, and I am the darling of Fox News. I mean, they still do monologues about me. Like, I will say I'm in better company now, because at first when they were taking me down, and just keep in mind, I lost all my work in 12 hours. So I was in the middle of a 50-city tour. The year before, I had done an 80-city tour. So don't talk to me about the real America. I've been everywhere, right? And so I was in the middle of a 50-city tour, and one of the reasons I took the photo, honestly, was, I'll be honest, when you're 58, and I used to work for a TV channel called Bravo, and then I got canned by this asshole named Andy Cohen, and allegedly. And so, you know, I would say, honestly, Hollywood has been trying to put me out to pasture since I've been like 40. So another reason I just want to be here, and I'm so proud to be here, is I just want to see you guys know that I'm just not going down, right? And I don't want that to ever happen to you, regardless of your field. This isn't a Hollywood story. This is a story of the government trying to take someone down. So we do have a wonderful and broad First Amendment, so luckily I can come here and speak my mind. But the First Amendment wasn't really working for me for a while. So when they spread the word, and it's funny because I'm a little vindicated now, so TMZ finally admitted, because I felt like it sounds crazy, but I thought, it feels like TMZ is coordinating with the White House. I know that sounds crazy, until Harvey Levin did an interview with the Daily Beast a few months ago and admitted he talks to Donald Trump multiple times a week. That would be like if Barack Obama was calling Perez Hilton for policy advice. That's not how it's supposed to be. And then there were all these hit pieces about me and all like the Hollywood rags, right? So, no one takes the National Enquirer seriously, except people in LA who think it's the newspaper. So what I also love is there's a guy named David Pecker, and he's the head of American media. So he's already flipped to the special counsel. So I'm like, I wasn't, so I was sort of on a media blackout, but some people would say like, oh, there's an article in not only the Enquirer, but they later on made a business deal where they ended up acquiring like Us Weekly and OK and In Touch and Life and Style. And I know there's a fluffy magazines, but in my industry, people like take that stuff seriously. So if there's an article in there that says, there was one that said I had lupus, well, that makes me unemployable and it makes me uninsurable. And then there was one saying that I was bald, which my sister passed away from cancer, so I shaved my head before she died, like in solidarity. So their whole campaign was to make me look, crazy, but more importantly, like I had broken the law. So when people think that I just had, a call from the Secret Service, I just really want to clear that up. I didn't have time. So the picture went live online. I had no idea it would be anything more than like a 3-day story in like a gay blog. Like I really didn't think, I thought it was so obvious it was a mask. I purposely wore a high neck collar and a stoic look on my face. And I don't know if it was a joke or a statement, but I thought it would be like something they would put in like Der Spiegel or Sharlee Abdo. I didn't know it would be on freaking TMZ saying I had joined ISIS and I had cut the president's head off. And can we talk about the logistics of that? So that would mean I would fly from my house in California to the White House, sneak in unnoticed, chop off the president's head, unnoticed, then get on a plane, go all the way back to California, take the picture at my house, and then go back to DC, hop over the fence again, and sew it back on his necks. I don't know, I'm not a surgeon. But there were a lot of people that still think I was holding even any kind of a severed head. So let me just clear that up. I did not go to the severed head warehouse. I did not go to Severed Heads R Us. It was a mask. So the photographer kind of screwed me too, because he took the copyright and he's probably gonna make a lot of money from that photo, because the Smithsonian is actually they've already asked for my dress. So I'm history, baby, and I'm out of work. All right, so the very next day, it was just like sort of a lot of, bad press, and even I had to turn off the TV, and I got a lot of phone calls from people saying they would never associate themselves with me, and that part was just hurtful, right? But then the next day I got a phone call from one of my many lawyers, many. They all love me. They're all probably gonna come here based on what I pay them. And I got a call from my really, really good First Amendment attorney, and his name is Alan Isaacman, and he won the landmark Supreme Court case, Jerry Falwell versus Hustler magazine. So if you've ever seen the film, The People versus Larry Flynt, he's the real guy that Ed Norton played. Because when you're in this much trouble, you want a guy who's won a Supreme Court case against a porn star. All right, so he did a good job, but he called me the next day and he was like, kid, I got some news, which is always bad, right? And I was already kind of a wreck, and I didn't know how I was gonna convince people I wasn't in ISIS. Oh, by the way, my mom was drunk, and my mom calls me and she goes, Jesus Christ, Kathleen, out of all the goddamn clubs you had to join, why couldn't you take up stamp collecting? I said, Mom, that's very modern and it's too ahead of your time. But anyway, she enjoys a box of wine. So my own mother thought, although she kept saying, you're in Al-Qaeda, like it's some kind of a bug. So I said, Mom, I'm not in Al-Qaeda, I'll talk to you later. But she still wants me to be a dental hygienist and get a real job. Anyway, so he called me the next day and he said, I got a call from the DOJ. And I'm like, the Department of Justice? He said, yes. And he said, you're being put under an open-ended investigation by the Secret Service and the US Attorney's Office. And what that means is the Secret Service, it is their job, obviously, to look at genuine threats against the president, right? And then when I said open-ended, I said, well, what does that mean? I've never been arrested. I don't know anything about this world. And he said, it means they can keep it open as long as they want. And I said, well, what about the US Attorney's Office? And he said, well, they're on hold to see if you violated anything to arrest you. And I said, okay, and I'm just shaking. And I said, well, what do I do now? And he said, this is the part that always gets me. He said, they want you to go downtown to the jail in downtown LA, and they want you in a jumpsuit and in cuffs. They want video of a perp walk. And I said, but this time I was just crying, and I said, did I break the law? And he said, no. And I said, did I violate the First Amendment in any way? And he said, no. And I said, okay, well, and I'm a prudent woman, some may say cheap, and I never thought I would say this to an expensive attorney, but I swear to God, I said, Alan, I don't care how much it costs. Over my dead body am I letting any woman, any young person, any LGBT person, anyone in the world see me do a freaking perp walk for doing nothing wrong. Maybe the picture offended you, but it did not violate the law in any way. So he was like, oh, okay. And then I said, well, what kind of a Specter am I going to be under if this is an investigation? And he said, you know, they can tap your phones and they can do what's called a no-knock raid. And he was negotiating with the US Attorney's Office for 2 months. Then he told me, you're also on the no-fly list, like a terrorist. So I travel for a living, and I thought that seems a little extreme. And so I said, well, obviously they're trying to make some sort of example of me, but I don't understand. Isn't this kind of nothing? And he said, well, in this environment, we have to go through the paces. And so what happened was, after 2 months, he negotiated so I could be interrogated in his office. But once again, I just want people to know, they started the investigation without, you know, giving me even the opportunity to try to have a phone call with the Secret Service, you know. And all the guys who allegedly made threats against the president, like Johnny Depp got drunk somewhere and was just being Johnny Depp. You can smell him a mile away. I know he's been here. And, you know, my friend Peter Fonda, he had one call with the Secret Service, the singer Morrissey, Snoop Dogg. He's not going to mess with Snoop Dogg. So it was just me, because I don't have a studio behind me. I'm self-made. I don't have some big producer dude who's going to come and save the day. I don't have a studio or a network. I'm kind of a one-man band. And I think I was sort of the perfect target. The odd thing is, I've known Trump for so long that one time on an old episode of The Apprentice, do you like how those episodes are missing? They actually hired me. He personally hired me to roast him as part of one of the challenges. So it's not like he doesn't know my vibe, right? And then, then the First Lady tweeted against me, and that was also bizarre. I got fired from CNN, had no future, et cetera. But the part I want you to know about is, I think the misconception people have is that either I'm whining or I deserved it or had it coming. At least in the United States of America, there's nothing wrong with that photo. Now, I don't know the laws here as well. I know they're a little tighter. But, you know, when I'm in the States, I always say to people, God forbid any of you took that photo, or if you had a 13-year-old kid and they put it on Twitter, they shouldn't have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on legal defense. They shouldn't have a federal investigation by 2 federal agencies. And here's the kicker. So after 2 months, I had to testify under oath. And I had practiced a lot with the attorney because it was obviously getting more and more serious. And the death threats were so serious that every time the FBI comes over to my house, and they just came over again October 29th, a year and a half after the photo. And here's the deal. When the FBI calls my lawyer, it's kind of a threat. When they call me personally, it's a more serious threat. When they just come over unannounced, it's a serious threat. So on October 29th, they came over, and did you guys read about the MAGA bomber who was sending pipe bombs to Robert De Niro and people like that? So I already known that I was on the MAGA bomber list. That was just a phone call. But they came over in person to tell me, they said, you know, his name is Cesar Sayak, and they said, you know, he's in custody. And I'm in my PJs, and I'm just gonna try to make you laugh, but every time the FBI comes to my house, remember Cheers? I go, Norm! And they never laugh. But it's where everybody knows your name. Come on in, fellas. All right, they were not laughing. And so they read me this letter called A Duty to Warn. And they said, well, in interrogating the MAGA bomber, we found out that he shared his list with like-minded people. And I'm standing there in my PJs, and I was actually filming my special that night, which, by the way, no one in Hollywood will even take a meeting with me. And I came off a really successful world tour. In fact, I played the Palladium and sold it out. It was fantastic. You guys were an amazing audience. Take me. I want new citizenship. So I had come off a successful tour, and you know, I couldn't play the States, and it wasn't safe, and there's still some things that aren't safe. But I just want you to know what happened to me it can happen to you. And as you know, the social media campaign and all the stuff that's going around, it is now global. And Putin practiced on his own country first, and they have like their own Facebook and all that other stuff. But it's just be careful on social media, because I'm now really suspicious of like the Zuckerbergs and the Jack Dorseys and the Sandbergs. Like I feel like they do know how to kind of fix that stuff. And so that stuff took off like a virus. And I finally went and did my interrogation, and it was scary. And right before the feds came in, because it wasn't a situation where if I screwed up, my lawyer could be like, I need a moment with my client. And I'll never forget, before the interrogation, my lawyer said to me, kid, I think you're gonna do great, but I gotta be honest, you blow this and you leave in cuffs. And the reason I tell you that, and this is also unprecedented in the history of the states, they were considering charging me with conspiracy to assassinate the President of the United States, which holds a lifetime sentence. So as someone who's made a career telling dick jokes, I don't think that's the direction any of us want to go. But at least thank you for giving me the opportunity to clear up what really happened. I hope I've scared you a little bit, made you laugh a little bit, but I just need to keep telling the story because people just think like, what's the big deal? You took an offensive picture. Yeah, you don't need to charge people with conspiracy to assassinate the President of the United States. So that was my story. And now we'll sit down, Mr. President. You're the only person I talk to. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. I brought you some really scary news titles too that came out at the time. Can I read them?
Yeah, go.
All right. So these are three of just the ugliest headlines. TMZ, Kathy Griffin beheads President Trump. I love that you're laughing, thank God, because nobody was that day. Breitbart, a serious news outlet. Kathy Griffin beheading Hollywood's feminist A-list cashes in, I wish, on global suffering of people of color, culturally appropriating the Islamic State-style beheading. Oh yes, there's a lot of people. I love you guys for laughing. Thank you. Oh God, they're great. They're so smart. ABC News. Okay, so the reason I say that is, a lot of people, most Americans don't have basic cable, right? So like, my family, a lot of, like my mom and stuff, she would just get the news from the local news. So when it's bled into what they call the mainstream media, that's a whole different animal. So when you're watching your evening 6 o'clock news and they're saying stuff like this, then it seems real. And I think they knew that. So it just turned into, and I said hit pieces, Us Weekly, In Touch, Life and Style, OK, Inquirer. And as I bragged, agents and people in Hollywood think that's the news. And so I just don't think that any US president should be able to make a private citizen, much less a female comedian, unemployable, uninsurable, and also in fear for their life. I don't know, you guys probably know what Interpol is, right? So I was on the no-fly list for 2 months, and after my interrogation, when I was exonerated, they put me on the Interpol list. So I went to do this massive tour, and I did, I think, 17 countries, and I was detained at every single airport. So I want you guys to know something. There's a lot of kind of mythology about what they can and can't do, and so, everywhere from London Heathrow to, Singapore to LAX, they can take your cell phone and they can take your SIM card. So take your porn off. No, but a lot of people think that, that only happened for a short amount of time. They can do it, and you are at their will. And I filed 3 Freedom of Information Act requests because I still to this day, I don't know what was on my passport. But I can tell you that every time they would scan it, the poor person working there would go like this. And then I would put on my I'm not an ISIS face. So I just want you guys to be aware of that stuff, because as I say, if it happened to me, who knows? Who knows who's next?
Well, that ties perfectly to my first question, which is, why do you think the administration came after you so hard?
Because they could, and I think, I think that one thing that crowd is about, and like I said, I'm 58 years old, I've been doing stand-up for 40 years. And even I was no W fan, But even in the era, you could make fun of him and people didn't say you weren't patriotic. I mean, you kind of expect that from a comedian. They make fun of things good, bad, or indifferent. And during the Clinton years, oh, you could make fun of the jizz on the dress, it was heaven. And so I've never experienced anything like this. And one of the reasons is maybe a combination of, I personally think that Donald Trump personally, as well as his whole crowd, meaning the entire administration, half of them are canned and going to prison, which is great. But I honestly think they don't know what to do with a woman who has the audacity to try to continue being successful in any business, but certainly in such a male-driven business. So I think they chose me because they knew that I did not have the kind of backing. Like I said, if I was in like a movie franchise or if I was on a network television show or something like that. And I think they knew I was kind of an easy mark.
Were you surprised that the media, especially CNN as well, kind of
That one hurt. Like, I don't even have a joke about that because I really loved Anderson Cooper and I really loved doing New Year's with him. And you know, no one gave me a heads up call or anything. Although the guy who runs the network, Jeff Zucker, is not, he's an idiot. He shouldn't be running CNN, that's for sure. But anyway, he's like not very smart. He's the guy who put Emerald on. Remember that show, Emerald? All right, anyway, so that alone. And so I think also I'm dealing with two middle-aged white guys who have known nothing but white guy privilege. And I think they had no qualms about not only, you know, stripping me of just a one night a year job, but saying I'm banned for life. Like it was all, everybody was making these grand statements. You know, like I played many casinos in Vegas, but at the time I used to play the Mirage. Well, they made this statement, like she's banned from the Mirage. And the worst is I was the international spokeswoman for Squatty Potty. You heard me. And yeah, it's a footstool that unkinks your colon so you have a smoother poop. Yeah, I was proud to have that gig. So the Squatty Potty people made a breaking news statement. So it just took off like wildfire and it was really, really tough. And like I said, a lot of people just straight up called me and said, I can't be associated with you anymore. And then I got a horrible lawyer named Lisa Bloom for 2 days and she made things worse. And there was like this press conference from hell. You should kind of check it out online. It's so bad. You should like smoke some weed and see it's bad. So I had to learn a lot. But the good thing is I've been learning so much. And for example, when the touring company, the promoter company that I usually worked with, they kind of, in my opinion, turned their backs on me. So one thing I will say is that when I was doing the world tour, as I started doing more cities in the States, I thought I could maybe play like 5 cities. So they kept fighting me, and I called them the old white dinosaurs. I remember this one phone call I had from the promoters, and they were all yelling at me because I played Canada first. I'm not crazy, and but I had done well. I had done well here in Europe, and I said, "Look at my sales. The tour grossed $4.4 million, and I don't have an opener. I just stand there with a bottle of water like this and tell my dick jokes and all this other stuff. And I ended up taking home $450,000. And I'm not crying poor, but the amount of money I had to spend on security was exorbitant. And that's not anything a comedian should have to worry about, of all things, right? And so they would get mad at me and they would call and I would start to say, what if I started trying to promote my own concerts? And I said, you know, with this kind of material, I insist on playing the great halls. You know, I'm not gonna play any clubs, those days are behind me. But more importantly, I said, this is a story that's historic, for better or worse. So I sold out Carnegie Hall in less than 24 hours, and they actually got mad. So they called, and I said, I think I need to kind of take over the promotion business of this tour because I can tell you guys are distracted, or you're doing the Rihanna tour or some big stadium artist. And they were so livid and they said, who do you think you are? You think you can promote yourself? And I said, well, yes. I said, I'm not saying I can promote Rihanna, but I can promote me. And so I hired a marketing company in Washington, D.C. instead of Hollywood. And they helped me find the people that I knew were supporting me, but also would actually buy tickets. So I started at the age of 58, I started my first mailing list and text list, and that's really what sold out the tour, because I couldn't advertise my shows in a conventional way because most of the country had a very, very adverse reaction, and online it's just vicious. Like, I'm kind of afraid for you guys to even post, like, saw at Kathy Griffin today, because you're gonna get a lot of robots and a lot of people saying, ISIS lady be bad in response. So they're keeping that party going. And so what I did learn in the process was I wanted to just be a jerk and break a record. So when I sold out Carnegie, and none of them said like, oh, this is great, because they got their 15%. And I said, I'm going to play Radio City the night before, 7,400 people. And so I just wired $250,000 to Radio City and rented it. And so now I've learned, I know how to rent a hall, I know how to hire the ushers, I know how much the insurance is, and I've actually taken over that part of my business. So I had to change my whole business model, and the reason I hired a marketing company in DC is because I knew they wouldn't market me like a regular sort of Hollywood talent, but they knew how to really geo-target folks, almost like I was like an unknown congressperson or something. And that's what it took, really specific geo-targeting to find folks that would go, I don't think she's an ISIS. I think she's funny. I'm gonna go see her. This sounds like an interesting story. And it actually broadened my audience. So I now get resistors as well as gay guys and soccer moms.
So this was obviously a historic story. Do you feel as though, and you said you come to these kind of events to try and tell the message and tell the story so it doesn't happen again. Do you feel confident that there is any progress, that you have made any progress, that there's a chance that it would happen again? Or do you think it's got worse?
I think it's gotten worse because as long as Trump continues to be in office and all of his like band of thieves, and I mean, I'm just saying, you guys, I don't know if you're following the Mueller investigation, there's like a lot of indictments, a lot of people flipping, and I don't mean like secretaries, assistants. I'm talking, national security advisors. These guys are dirty. They're in bed with the Russians, the Ukrainians, oligarchs. Now they've started, I don't know if you know, but they've started investigating the actual inaugural fund, and they found out it was a bunch of like Russian oligarchs and stuff. So nothing like this has ever happened in our history, and I think in the States, we did take the Constitution so seriously, we kind of thought it was infallible. And unfortunately, I'll be honest, I don't believe it is anymore. And a lot of people think that the institutions are still holding. I don't think they are. I think that they're crumbling. I don't know if you saw the State of the Union, but it was like watching a crazy person who needs to be on a Britney Spears 5150 psych hold now. And so it was so, I don't want to normalize him, but I do think that in one way, he did it there used to be a head of a CIA named John Brennan. And John Brennan had a security clearance stripped and he was tweeting about him. The head of the CIA, like he knows all your secrets, dude. So he's so nutty that it's happened to other people, not in this particular way, but I do believe it can happen again. And yet, on the other hand, I think he's gonna go down. I really do. I don't know if he's gonna get impeached or resign, but I kind of remember the Nixon era. Like I remember being a kid and watching those hearings. The thing that you guys should know that's really different and really scary is, for whatever reason, the Republican Party, which is our conservatives, they somehow have a body that will do whatever he says, even against possibly their own interests. So during the Nixon era, you actually had Republicans finally come around and go, oh, well, there's tapes and there was a break-in. Well, that was domestic. So this is what Trump is doing in his administration. I mean, first of all, Ivanka, what the hell is she doing besides her nails? And then Jared Kushner, whose dad went to prison for financial fraud, like, you're next, Jared. And so you've got these like idiots who don't know anything about history or the government and honestly don't care. And I know it sounds crazy, but this whole story might come down to two buildings, Trump Moscow Tower and 666 Park. But it's almost, the reason they're doing what's called RICO investigations is they're treating him kind of like a mob boss who's been caught. And that is completely different than anything we've seen. Like I said, we've had sort of questionable characters, but this honestly is a whole other level, and it's very frightening. And, he doesn't know what NATO is. So I'm glad to be here because you guys understand the importance of NATO, and he is desperate to get out of NATO, as is Vladimir Putin, Shinzo Abe, and Xi Jinping. So when that's who you're in bed with, he loves dictators. And you can see him trying to make the United States a dictatorship. And you have something like 33% of the voting population, which I'm just gonna admit, this is embarrassing. Only half of Americans vote. It's really bad. And I've done a lot of Rock the Vote campaigns, even with Miley Cyrus. And if that doesn't work, nothing will. And so there are a group of people that still come at me on sometimes at least once a week after all this time. People will scream at me, go back to Syria, you terrorist. And here's my new joke. When people think I'm an ISIS, I go, I just worked at the gift shop. Now I can make the joke. But I think that he gets off on that. It's all he knows. And like I said, I think he may legit be mentally unstable, but also he, like I said, he is just aggressively stupid. He doesn't read the presidential daily briefs. We found out that Mike Flynn, our national security advisor, was selling them to Russians. This is heavy duty stuff that we've never dealt with. So unfortunately, I think our country has taken a little too long to really get the seriousness of it.
So I wanted to ask you just about the First Amendment. You've said that you think some commentators on the right and the media on the right have co-opted free speech. What do you mean by that?
Okay, so it's interesting. When I was playing the Palladium, do you guys know who Joseph Paul Watson is, or Paul Joseph Watson? He's a big Nazi. He lives in London. So anyway, I know all the Nazis now because they all come after me. It's so sick. I know all the Nazis. And so a lot of the, we call them maggots. Like if you're a Trump person, you're called like MAGA hat and all this stuff, maggots. So I'm now on every list you can imagine. There's algorithms. My timeline on all my social media is clearly been taken over now. I think was one of the first just regular citizens to be on that list. And now I'm on it for anything and everything. And so like when I did my show in London, this guy said he was gonna kill me on stage. Oh, and their way of assassinating me by choice is they wanna shoot me in the cunt, cut my head off, and then stuff my head up my cunt. So when you hear that day in and day out, sometimes you have to take measures. And so that's part of the rise of the populism, which is global. And another reason I'm so glad to be here is you guys are aware of this. And I'm gonna be honest, in America, we don't really pay too much attention to news outside of America. So I love like watching real news here. And so a lot of Americans are horrified by what they see, but they don't know that it's happening in Poland. They don't know that Merkel has been marginalized. I mean, Trump doesn't even call her chancellor. He doesn't even know her fucking title. And so, they don't know pulling out of TPP what that meant. They don't know that you don't get to pick a fight with Canada and Justin Trudeau, although I think Ivanka wants to bang him. I really do. I think Ivanka, who wants to bang Kushner? Nobody in this room. And so one thing that is disheartening to me is I wish more regular American citizens would be a little bit more of the globalism. And, as you guys know, Steve Bannon, he's now going all around the world trying to get people to be globalists, which really just means racist. And if you think about Russia, it's a white country. And the other thing, I don't know if you know this is big news in the States, but we've just found out that Russia and the GRU has been funding the NRA, the National Rifle Association. So there are so many mass shootings in the United States. It's probably very shocking to you. It's shocking to me. So, and yet the Trump voters in particular, they're so afraid of losing their Second Amendment rights that they don't care about the first one. And as I always say, there's a reason it's the first. It's a really important one, okay? And a lot of people don't know that in Russia, you're not allowed to possess a firearm at all. So you've got all these dumbass white Americans thinking Russia is so great because it's white, and they think they can go over there with their AR-15s. No, they know nothing about it because they're not interested. So Trump has a way of speaking to people that is somehow mesmerizing to some. And I guess it's a feeling, it's a joke to me that young white men feel that they're marginalized and they call me racist against white people. And that's kind of their bread and butter. And I thought, well, I guess if you tell one group over and over, you're being victimized, you're getting screwed over, I don't know, maybe they want to believe it. And a lot of them admit they have never voted until Trump. So, we have elections every year. They're not every 4 years, they're not every 2 years. So luckily we took the House back. And luckily, Nancy Pelosi is getting a few less death threats, but she's badass and she's very inspiring. So I get some hope, but they've really got the power. So when people, if any of you guys came up to me and said, what the hell is America doing? Why can't you change things? They've been digging in pretty much since the Civil Rights Act of 1964 with LBJ, just gerrymandering districts, the Electoral College, where if you have a state like Maine that has, 4 people, then you have 2 senators and they have the same amount of voting rights as a senator from California, and California is the, 6th biggest economy in the world. So that is, it's a system that I think, I say the other team, has been working on since then. And I honestly kind of think ever since the Civil Rights Voting Act, white people have been pissed. And I didn't know that. I come from an urban area. I come from Chicago, and I've never lived in an all-white area and all that stuff. But I kind of think, I hate to say it, I think it's really about gender politics and race at the end of the day.
And then my final question before we open up to the floor is that you said that had the photo been taken now in the kind of post or after Me Too and Weinstein era, Do you think that the Me Too and Time's Up movements have actually delivered any real change?
I think it's really a struggle with this administration. I remember we have a president who, you know, I mean, you guys had Stormy here, right? I love Stormy Daniels. She's so awesome, and she came to one of my shows in Boston, and we took a picture of us both flipping off Trump, and it went viral. And but I love her because, you know, she is the face of sex workers, which I do think should be unionized, and she's so funny and so clever and so smart, and she's a hard worker, and she makes films and she acts in them, and she's fearless. And I think in one way there's some hope there. But the truth is, for right now, folks who think like I do and believe in the First Amendment, we're outnumbered and we're outpowered. We're actually, I'm wrong, we're not outnumbered. What's odd about America and our political system is they can play a numbers game where the minority can rule. And that's what's happening right now. The minority is ruling. So that's really what's been disheartening for me to really, you know, to learn the hard way. So thank God we won the House, but I do think it's embarrassing that we lost the Senate. And I believe we've only lost the Senate by 5 votes. And when you think about it, there's 5 old white dinosaur senators who get to decide the policy for the entire country. And they're all afraid of this orange buffoon. I love that you guys have that balloon of him. Oh, it's heaven. And they're all so afraid of him. And one reason I like to speak to people is to say, well, if I can survive this crap, then you can, and certainly entities can, and companies can. So the more we talk to each other about it and they're honest, I think that's the way we make progress. But if people are just gonna hide in their homes thinking he's gonna go away, he might go away, but that sentiment is something that the United States has to deal with once and for all. Racism, sexism, misogyny, we gotta lay it out on the table because we are a country of immigrants. What's happening with those tent cities, they're privatized. So they're owned, as far as I know, by the DeVos family, the Prince family, and United States senators have gone in to check on the kids in cages, which I have to say, out of all the things Trump has done, that's probably the most un-American and deplorable thing. I've never seen anything like it. It's even worse, in my opinion, than the Japanese internment camps, which we all swore would never happen again. But the idea that asylum seekers would be coming to live in the States, where I'm going to be honest, most Hispanic people who are refugees and get citizenship, they're cleaning houses, I'll be honest. I mean, many go on to do, you know, amazing, great things, and there's a variety as there is with any group, but there is not a crisis at the Southern American border. There isn't. If you look at the stats, even, my joke is when I go to Mexico, I just say Lo siento the whole time I'm there. But fewer Mexicans have crossed the border in the last 3 years. So the idea that our fake dumbass president would be sending US troops, many of whom are Hispanic themselves, to go to the border and do what? Pick people off when they're climbing under a fence, a mom with her kid, and then they put them in these weird like tent environments and they separate them. I don't know what the future of that is, but that is really some scary stuff.
Right, let's throw the questions over to the audience.
On a high note.
If you want to stick your hand up and wait for the microphone to come to you, yeah, let's go to the hand back there first.
Hi, first of all. Do you think that the influence of celebrities, athletes, comedians, kind of in the political arena has in a way helped Trump gain kind of voters of the less educated, less political people in the country, or do you think it does have a good kind of negative impact against
I think
him?
it's turning around in real time. For example, when Colin Kaepernick started taking a knee, it's taken a long time for people to understand what that meant. So if you recall, first he would sit on the bench and he was fighting police brutality, which is immeasurably tipped against young African-American men or African-American people. Well, I guess we're in English, say black people, but he was taking a stand. So their game is that whenever you exercise your First Amendment rights, they call you unpatriotic. And they've been able to kind of weave that in. So I think initially, a lot of people believed that. And one of the things that was funny is that Trump tried to start a boycott the NFL, and that was a big hashtag. If you think these rednecks are not going to watch football like they do every single day or Monday night or whatever. So I think the thing about Kaepernick that's interesting is he's been very smart about how he's done his own personal campaign, meaning he learned from his military friends that taking a knee is the way the military tells you to pay respect to the flag, but you're taking a knee exercising your First Amendment right. So Trump doesn't even want to hear that. I mean, he can't even read that much of a sentence. And so I think that there's been a lot more support around Colin Kaepernick, and you see guys like, LeBron James supporting him, and more people are supporting him now than ever before. My friend Amy Schumer wouldn't even do a Super Bowl ad. So I think that tide is turning in a good way. It also depends how you're perceived and how you play it. So obviously when it initially happened to me, I did everything wrong. I did the most horrible apology, I did a horrible press conference, and there's this learning curve because it's never happened before. So I think it depends on the celebrity, but I look at someone like Jane Fonda or reference her because she was so, blacklisted that she just had the stuff to come back. And I think her first film back after the blacklist was Clute, for which she won the Academy Award. So I think one thing that is helpful is if you have someone who wants to go through that exercise and they either, surround themselves with other people that are like-minded who can help them, or they figure out the best way to communicate it. And I myself never thought I would be at Oxford speaking, so I thought, okay, I can tell my dick jokes, but when I go to Oxford, I got to bring the heat and tell them what really happened. So I think eventually it's going to help, because at the end of the day, what happened to me as a private citizen. So that's really my message. It's not a Hollywood issue. I know that what happened to me could happen to any. I used to be a bank teller, or I was a busboy. I was so bad I wasn't even a waitress. But anyway, it could happen in any field. And this administration's message is so, they expect everyone to be so in lockstep that I think slowly people are figuring out a way to protest and show some civil disobedience in a way where when people see images of an old lady at a protest being kicked down by a police officer, they see it in a very different way. So it's about messaging, and what sucks is we're up against a team of people, like one of Trump's main speechwriters is this psycho named Steve Bannon, and there's actually a YouTube tape of him. He's like a rich white kid, right? And he went to Santa Monica High. And there's a tape of him when he had hair, and he was doing a debate about how the janitors should pick up their stuff more. Now, the janitors were people of color. So this kid was fucked up when he was 16. Now he's the president's main speechwriter. So the more we kind of get to know what we're dealing with, I think, celebrity or not, we're more effective at kind of combating them.
Let's jump to the hand. Yeah, there's another hand over here. And if you could stand up when you get the microphone, please. For the camera.
Very Oprah. Love it.
Hi.
Hi.
Oh, thanks so much for being absolutely incredible and keeping telling your story.
Thank you.
We've all seen the train wreck of this administration in almost uncountable ways now, and you mentioned big politicians and US civil servants and kind of flipping and being exposed as corrupt, and that you kind of almost lack faith in certain aspects of the Constitution. America has a history of this Jeremiah political rhetoric, which is the idea that Americans have never had, since the Constitution, a major revolution, and all views of it are kind of, we can always get repentance as a nation, we can fix it from the inside. Do you think now that Americans are changing this view at all when we are in such different times, and has it changed for you at all, or do you think it's staying very much the same?
What I've learned, and it's actually disappointing, because I go to any march. I go to the women's marches and the refugee marches and all that stuff. This particular president is not moved by any of that. Any other president would be worried about their numbers and perception. So I now have come to believe that, unfortunately, and this is the one, honestly, that really stings, the only real power we have, in my humble opinion, is the power of the ballot. And that's why it was such a victory for us to win the House. And it's so gratifying to see Nancy Pelosi, who can just run circles around him, and that other crowd he runs with, they're all like Goldman Sachs, Wall Street fools and stuff. So I wish that I could say we could make change faster by taking to the streets and having a revolution of some kind. And this guy's impervious to it. I mean, there are protests in front of Trump Tower every day. And he waves like it's a parade in his favor, and the Macy's Day Parade or something. So I think the most important thing I can say is, get to know what's called the down ballot, right? So like I said, a lot of Americans vote every 4 years for the president. And what I think is important for Americans to understand is it's often the down ballot electeds that have more to do with your actual everyday life. So I actually invited my congressman to my house. I thought, I gotta meet this guy. And my previous congressman named Adam Schiff has just become chairman of the judiciary in the House. So he's actually gonna be able to subpoena people. And, I don't know if you know, but there was a famous case where this bigoted woman named Kim Davis in some redneck state. She wouldn't marry two guys, and it was the law of the land. So these guys couldn't get married. And no one thought, I think she was like a county supervisor or something. So it made some news. Trump brought her to rallies. They all went, yay, MAGA or whatever. And the great thing is she was unseated this year by one of the gay guys who she wouldn't let get married. So I wish there was an overnight answer, but unfortunately, kind of one of my things I do, I don't know if I told you, but I admit to committing voter fraud, and I'm very proud of myself. So what I do is every year I put on my Twitter, Kathy Griffin's handy dandy voting guide. And now I've just become obsessed with every single office, whether it's, city council, and that's another thing is we're learning as a country, these down ballot elections, sometimes there's a special election, senators are every 6 years, some are every 2 years. Those down ballot elections can be honestly life-changing. So like I said, when you look at our Senate now and you look at the House and it's so diverse and there's more women and they're younger and they know how to use Twitter and everything. And then you look at the Senate and like I said, it's these old white dinosaurs in their fucking diapers. And you think, first of all, I think 4 of them make the decisions. And then Mike Pence comes in. And don't think he's the answer, my friends. Mike Pence is not the answer, all right? That nut job, he ruined Indiana, and he's like picking out swatches for the drapes. So he's no better. So unfortunately, we still have an issue with just simply getting people to vote. And now that we feel that there's actual intervention in voting machines, get this, it's actually safer to go back to paper ballots. So even though everyone wants to vote like they do on American Idol or Great Britain Idol, I don't know what you guys have, but even though everyone wants phone voting, guess what? We can't have that anymore. Because if Zuckerberg, Sandberg, and Dorsey can't even keep track of their own platforms, I don't want any elections done electronically. So believe it or not, that's like a very modern thing to want good old-fashioned paper ballots. So I wish there was an answer, and there are certain policies that might move him one way or another, but really it's all about how the House votes and how the citizens vote. And I wish we could have elections once a week.
Let's jump to another question. To the hand in the back.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm so excited. Okay.
Oh, thank you. My pleasure.
This is very cool. Okay. So coming to somewhere like Oxford, where it seems to be a microcosm of the systematic inequalities that you've been talking about in America, did you feel at all hesitant when coming?
Oh, absolutely. I didn't go to college, so I feel really stupid. I mean, I did my first commercial when I was 17. And like I said, in this business, they try to age you out of the system as fast as they can. So I had to beg my parents to not make me go to college. And that did not go over well. But I said, look, I need to start working now. So I did my first commercial when I was 17. And then I worked for free for almost 20 years. So any of you that are drama students, get ready to do everybody's student film for free, plays for free. It's just an industry where you do a lot of stuff for free. And I think another thing that is important for young people to understand is that's a good part of the gig. Like I read this great quote by Pacino, and he said a lot of his friends don't like auditioning, but he used to think of every audition as an opportunity to act. And so, like I said, I haven't made money since the photo, and I don't know when I'm gonna make money again, but I did fund my own special, and since no TV people would talk to me, guess what? It's premiering at South by Southwest, which is this big film festival in March. So I'm hoping people will hear the story and go, oh, she left ISIS. It was too hot there in Raqqa. Also, they get up too early, you guys. I can't be getting up at 5 in the morning doing the jungle gym. It's too hard. So I think the more we can just kind of show ourselves, and like I said, especially as if you're in any marginalized community, and that means pretty much anybody but a Trump, then I think it's important to talk to each other more, be honest about what's really going on, be aware. Read real news. Twitter's not news. Facebook isn't news. So if you hear something that doesn't sound quite right, go get a secondary, get a tertiary, find out what's going on. And you may be able to convince a friend of yours who believes something crazy they saw in a meme or something. And I do think that this is kind of it. I don't want to get started on climate change because my joke is I give the planet 2 months. Remember after Inconvenient Truth and Al Gore said we had 200 years and then he said 50? I give it 2 months. 2 months. We're all melting. And yet, I live in a country where the entire administration denies it. And that starts wars, et cetera, et cetera. So I think the more we talk about this stuff, the more people, in the way that they were able to convince a small group of people that ageism and racism is acceptable, I think we're gonna win in the end, because there just are more of us. There just are more people around the globe that are experiencing this. Although I will say what frightens me is the globalism, racism, that is spreading the world. And I don't know how that happened. You know, when I think of, like I said, when I don't understand how you can think of someone like Xi Jinping, who just made himself president for life, and that should scare the shit out of everybody, you know, not just us, although it scares me more, because I can't imagine Trump for life. Although I think he has dentures, and one time he was giving a speech and his top tray fell out, and it was so funny, because my dad had dentures, so I know that look, and he does one of his rambling speeches, and at the end he goes, "God bless America." Oh. And then we have our press secretary, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, and she and Kellyanne Conway have a very special place in hell. And so it's just odd to be in a country where you're lied to by your own government over and over and over. So I love talking to you guys because I experienced it firsthand. I mean, imagine being charged with conspiracy to assassinate the president of the United States, and you tell dick jokes for a living. I didn't sign on for this. But the good news is it is forcing us to learn all this stuff. So that's what I like. I like hearing from you guys, and I like hearing from people that know better than I, which is most people.
Then I think we've got time for 2 more questions. So yeah, let's go to the hands. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi, thank you so much for coming. And speaking of like the power of the ballot, amid this like insane voter suppression, like Stacey Abrams in Georgia,
it's real.
and it's really real voter ID laws, and just this like bullshit propaganda of like sending out flyers in Spanish with the wrong voting date.
That's right.
How do you think that the Democrats can not only combat that, but inspire people and motivate people to go to these crazy lengths just to cast their vote?
Well, there's a lot of it going on. Like right now, Georgia, Stacey Abrams was robbed, and I'm still convinced she won, and Andrew Gillum in Florida. So voter suppression is real. Obviously, one of the reasons I think it's real is because the other team is trying so hard to convince us it isn't. But, you know, like Chris Kobach got fired, and he was the guy from Kansas who I believe was busted for voter suppression. I may be wrong, but some of these guys are actually getting busted. So the nice thing is, somebody had a great expression, and they were saying a lot of women that were having these kind of arguments on Facebook are now taking to the streets. So I think it is about honestly making people aware of how voter suppression works. Because I admit, I suffer from white privilege, and every time I've gone to vote, no one has really questioned me. I show my ID and that's it. But in African American communities, they had something on Sundays called Souls to the Polls, because a lot of black people go to church and then they can go vote. So they stopped that in several states. So you've got these governors, like I don't know if you know about this guy, Ralph Northam, the governor of Virginia. He was photographed in his yearbook in blackface. You guys, what year is this? So did he resign yet? Are you shitting me still? I'm on like Northam watch. Okay, so you know, he's like a big voter suppression guy. And those guys click up, man. Like, let me tell you, those old white guys are scared shitless, and they are clicking up. And I would like to think this is their last stand, but we do outnumber them. So I think, you know, everything from the indigenous people, Native Americans, they won't have any polling booths on the reservation, all this other stuff. So the more that the news is talking about it, which is hard because Fox News is still unfortunately popular. I'm bummed it's on here at all. Like, you guys know it's fake, right? Like, Fox News really is a joke. Like, Sean Hannity's not real. He's like a anime. All right. But I think it's about awareness on the local level. So I'm glad you asked that question, because it's not always about knowing what's happening in DC. It's about living in a city or a state where you go, hey, there used to be 7 polling places, and now I notice there's 2. Or, you know, states have been caught throwing away ballots. So once again, that's why we're going back to paper ballots after decades of Democrats wanting something more modern, and now we had to totally change our way of thinking. So on the local level, as much as you can spread awareness about where it's happening, and that's why I think Stacey Abrams gave such a powerful rebuttal last night, is because I think most thinking people know she was robbed of the governorship. I mean, a black woman in Georgia, time's not up yet. Almost, but not quite.
And then let's go to the final question to the...
I feel like I'm scaring everybody. Everyone's like, I'm never going to America.
Thank you.
Hi.
Unfortunately, I'm not Barbara, so they couldn't paint my microphone. But
Remember?
Thank you for being
Barbra
here.
Streisand was on Oprah one time, and I was on Oprah once. I do a lot of shows once, for obvious reasons. And in the commercial break, I said, what was that like when Barbra Streisand showed up? Because I think she's amazing. And Oprah goes, she painted my bike white. And then I told the story in my special, and now Oprah hates me. But I still think it's diva fabulous.
Thank you for being here, longtime fan since the D-List days. So I wonder, as many fans and I guess other people may know, you have a lot of famous and celebrity close friends and acquaintances, including some who have had scandal, including most notably Rosie, previous and somewhat ongoing feuds with Trump and similar figures. And relatedly, I wonder, have you heard anything from them, or based on your own experience, you talk a lot about being a private citizen rather than a politician, but do you feel that you, as not just any private citizen, but as a very vocal celebrity, public figure, that your role as such has changed under this administration, or in general, in terms of celebrity meets politician?
Completely. I mean, my life really was before photo, after photo. I mean, Rosie, by the way, was amazing. She was the first call. And I always love to say she is the preeminent expert at being trolled by Donald Trump. I mean, he has been trying to take her down for 12 years. And by the way, I wish him luck. She's a formidable opponent. But she's been very supportive. And what is a difficult transition for me is, you know, for decades, I was doing specials about the Real Housewives and the Kardashians. And, oh, I don't know if you guys know this part, but do you guys know who my next door neighbors were during the whole thing? Kim and Kanye. Yes. I was like hunkered down in my house, and I had the comfort of Kim and Kanye, because whatever I was involved in, they were involved in something crazier. That was fabulous, by the way. Like, and I just want to say seriously, like on a serious note, because I've been calling the Kardashians dirty whores for 10 years. It's fun. But honestly, Kim was like really nice. And I think someone who's been through so much stuff, she would like send a note or something, or I would see her in the driveway, and people are always surprised that I say that, or they're like, you lost your street cred. I'm like, sorry, a lot of people turned on me and she didn't, you know? And so it was definitely a learning lesson. And I remember my friend Cat Williams, the comedian, he called me and he said, get out a pen and paper and write down the name of every person who calls you today that's really supportive. And by the end of the day, you're gonna have a list of your real friends. And it was 3 names. So one thing I have to be honest about, one thing that I just struggle with emotionally is the number of people that I've hosted charity gigs for and shown up at their events and helped them with this or that and been a voice for this or that. It hurts that none of them have done what I've called lifted a finger. Meaning, you know, people have been nice and that's great, but still a lot of people that really could have helped me, you know, could have given me 10 lines on a show. People that could have given me, you know, a few lines in a movie, or something to just go like, she's okay. She's the same Kathy that you know from the D-List and Suddenly Susan and her talk show and specials and all this other stuff. And that still has not happened. And I hope it happens, and I'm optimistic, but I'm still considered toxic, and there really is such a thing as the Hollywood blacklist, because I really worked in television for many years and for every network, and you know, I've probably made $75 million over my career. So to have all these guys that took their 10% all those years, I've done Super Bowl commercials, all sorts of things, now act like, I had one very, very high level agent tell me that I was a life's too short situation. And I said, well, you took the money. Click. So it's still hard to fight back, because like I said, I just think when you're a woman of a certain age, they honestly have this feeling like, who do you think you are to say this or do this? And I go, I'm Kathy Griffin, bitch. That's who I am. And I'm not gonna stop.